Have you ever used personality assessments in your work as a coach or maybe as an end user in a coachee role? I'm a huge fan of such assessments as they give us a common language to talk about preferences, behaviors, and how we are different from other people. On last week's episode of The Making of a Coach, we got to know one of the most popular professional assessments in Germany right now, the LINC Personality Profiler. It's used by more than 5,000 coaches running over 40,000 assessments per year. And it's going international these days. So on this episode, I was super excited to unpack the entrepreneurial story behind this success. I'm meeting Dr. Ronald Franke, one of the founders of LINC.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
Before this conversation, I had planned to dig deeper into personality psychology and the Big Five model that they're using, but I found Ronald's entrepreneurial story so interesting, how he did a coaching education next to his studies, how he worked into research, started a company, didn't really succeed, and eventually then combined his coaching practice with his research and entrepreneurial work and made the LINC Profiler a success. We had the original conversation of all of this in German. So if you speak German, click next and listen to the original. But for everyone else, we'll just follow here with a AI transcreation. Stay tuned. It really works surprisingly well. And yeah, what came out of this is not so much a coach story, but really a masterclass in entrepreneurship inside the coaching industry, told through Ronald's story. So let's hear from him.
So the LINC Personality Profiler is a digital personality analysis. That means basically it consists of a questionnaire that you fill out digitally and a report that is then created, which allows me to get to know myself, my personality, my potential a bit better. And the whole thing is based on a scientifically validated model so that I really have realistic and nicely visualized picture of my personality, which I can use to further develop myself.
Yes, thank you for the brief overview. So before we go deeper here, I would be interested in how your story in this area began.
So starting right from the beginning, it naturally began with a certain interest in psychology that I developed back in school. And I then started studying psychology and it continued to fascinate me. It eventually became clear that I actually did not want to become a therapist. I think most people who start studying psychology begin with the desire to become a psychotherapist, and some eventually stray from that path. Yeah, I was one of those people and eventually realized, okay, I would like to do something a bit different. I always wanted to understand how personality actually works. So it was more of an analytical thought behind it. And after university, after studying psychology, I continued working and researching at the university in the area of culture and personality, collected a lot of data, and also led a research project. Then we thought, okay, what can we do? We had a lot of research data, and we then converted it into a personality analysis. And that became the LINC Personality Profiler. And from that, this company was founded. That was already 8 years ago. And since then, the whole thing has been developing.
And today it is also a respectable company. I believe you have 40 employees today. What were you researching back then? Was it already like the Big Five model, or how far was that from today's LINC Profiler?
Pretty far away, to be honest. I think it's like most startups and company stories, it never turns out the way you think at the very beginning. So I think that is the more normal case. I worked as a coach. I offered coach training at the time. But what I did at the university was more related to culture, like intercultural communication. I spent a long time in India conducting research on intercultural differences in business and how Germans can manage and do business with Indian partners and how the cultures can fit well together in this context. We somehow spread this idea around the world and conducted a research project implementing this research approach in different countries. And eventually we had an incredible amount of data on cultures around the world and how to collaborate well with them, which then led to the creation of the first personality test. It was still called Culture ID, meaning my cultural identity, and it wasn't as successful as we had imagined because it turned out that intercultural personality analyses are really quite a niche. And from that, because we knew how to create good digital personality analyses that can be nicely visualized and implemented well, the idea emerged. Why don't we create a personality test, a personality analysis for a larger area? And at that point, you needed a little bit of time because there were already some options and you had to figure out, okay, which field do we want to occupy? Which niche, which group do we want to address? Based on my experience with coaches and in coaching, it made sense to say, hey, let's focus a bit more on this target group because existing personality analyses were actually more directed towards human resources and not so much towards the people who fill them out, meaning the end consumer. But definitely not to coaches who can use such tools very well to also apply them in coaching sessions. That was kind of our twist on the topic. And it worked really well because it turned out that both coaches and consumers appreciate it when the results are presented in a respectful and nicely visualized way. But the HR people also actually liked it quite a lot.
How did you get into that? What was your career path as a coach?
Well, that's obvious when you're studying psychology. And I was lucky that in Lüneburg, where I studied, there were indeed application-oriented seminars, which is not something you can take for granted. I knew it differently too. In the context of the application-oriented seminar on the topic of coaching, I think it was really called that. I got to know it and found it super exciting. And it was actually the same for everyone who was sitting in this seminar. That means more or less everyone who took the seminar went on to do coach training. So it's kind of something that naturally follows. And in a way, it's crazy that not every psychology program actually offers something like this directly. Funnily enough, I then adopted the concept when I later offered coaching training as well. I went to a university where I had previously worked as a lecturer, also part-time, and said to them, hey, why don't we offer coaching as an application-oriented subject? Then they said, okay. And in this course, I got them so excited about it and was able to recruit them all as participants in the training. So that's something that's just very closely related when you study psychology. Then you basically just wait to finally be able to do something practical and not just cram statistics and quantitative correlations and stuff all the time, which is totally overrepresented from my point of view in the classical psychology studies. But on another topic, it definitely comes up very quickly when you are confronted with it in your studies. I then did such training, funnily enough, also with someone who studied the same thing in Lüneburg and was just a few semesters ahead of me, and they had already started it that way. The seminar at the university sparked the enthusiasm. I then just did the training privately. It wasn't available at the university back then, and now it is available at universities. However, it's very expensive because it's really aimed at external people. And then I was a lecturer, especially for psychology. That means there was, again, a closeness where you could ask the students, are you interested in something like that? And because the interest has always been very high, I then conducted this training, this coaching training, accordingly at a university and in cooperation with this university. And the participants were largely recruited from among the students of this university.
Yes, also when we look at the career path as an independent entrepreneur, that's something I often see when I have people here who have been very successful in business. They always bring together various aspects from their lives, right? So, and that means in my employed job, I was somehow a leader here and there. And then from this network, I essentially built my coaching business. And what I hear from you now is that you actually combined the academia industry with entrepreneurial coaching activities. And to maybe get a bit technical and work that out, how can I imagine that? So you lectured at the university as an employee. And when did that transition into, okay, now you're doing your coaching training not at the University of Lüneburg anymore, but at Ronald Franke Consulting? Or how was the dividing line there and also the synergies?
I was never employed at the university with which I then did this cooperation. I was always there as a lecturer. And as a lecturer, you are usually self-employed, at least if you are doing it at different universities. You can, of course, also be employed as a lecturer, but I had worked as a freelance lecturer at various universities from time to time. And at this university, I just said, do you want to collaborate? And then I was basically self-employed the whole time.
And so it happened that the provider of the training was still the university, and you didn't build a brand or company around yourself as a coach trainer, but were actually self-employed at the university, so to speak?
Yes, exactly. Just like that, yes. That didn't really have anything to do with the personality profiler link, as you already said. It was just a different activity. I think, so if you ask me now, when you have many entrepreneurs on your podcast, this is of course partly because I always wanted to work independently. That's just a value in itself for me. So you always look around to see how you can do it. How can I implement this? And always looking for ways and means to somehow live this type of work arrangement. There were various roles, once as a lecturer at some universities, then as a coach trainer, again in cooperation with the university, and then with this spin-off from the university, which then became a real company in that sense and has further expanded and developed. Yes.
Yes, that means actually, if you look at it, in the course of your work as a coach and coach trainer, you actually discovered the target group for your actual product, the LINC Personality Profile.
Yes, you could say that. So that was definitely a key target group. Above all, that was also the important target group at the start of the company. Because they are oriented towards a further education, they were a target group and were therefore very easy to excite about our product, much more so than HR employees who are constantly besieged by people offering some great tools. The coaches are more open, or at least it was like that 8 years ago. I mean, now they are also overwhelmed because everyone is basically overwhelmed. But back then we found a niche and did it initially via Xing and approached them. You can't do that anymore today via LinkedIn. And you get so many messages that wouldn't work anymore. You have to say, you'd have to come up with something else. The coaches quickly realized that the product itself is of high quality, can help them, and is very fair in terms of conditions. They quickly said, okay, I'll try it. I want to continue my education anyway. I feel like I want to do something every year.
Yes, so you're already mentioning the coaches. I often do a coaching training, not only because I necessarily want to be a practicing coach, but also because I want to develop myself further. One cannot go without the other, and that is, of course, a need that you are fulfilling there. How are you? How did the product come about? So when you say you actually came from cultural research and then you realized, okay, we can do statistics, we can do factor analysis. What do we do with it now? What did this development process look like?
So first of all, we had already developed a personality analysis for the topic of culture. It was more about whether my behavior and personality fit with a certain culture and where the discrepancies are, and how can I deal with it so as not to get into conflicts with people from this culture. That's obviously not too far away. And then we had the advantage that both Martin and I have already taught personality psychology quite intensively. We were very deep into the topic of personality big five. So we have a very good understanding of how personality is constructed, what building blocks are there, and what models of personality can also be used when you want to measure personalities. Now, that means the idea was more or less actually born from the fact that we understood how to build and implement such a digital analysis and what to pay attention to. And then it made sense to look at what other topics there are where this knowledge can be applied. And then, of course, personality was an obvious choice, especially because we both know it very well. Martin had a professorship in psychology at the time that was simply much more exciting in terms of scope than this niche topic of culture, and also very relevant to our knowledge. And then we just incorporated that knowledge into this tool.
When did you then say, okay, forget about the whole culture. Let's focus on the big five instead?
Actually, it was like this. We believed one could also do a test for personality. And then it developed so quickly that this topic just worked so much better. It pushed the other topic to the side and ran alongside and eventually not at all. So it is often, I believe, more of a process, more of experimenting and orienting oneself towards what simply works better, a bit of trial and error, rather than making very hard business decisions and saying, we stop this now, we do this now. When dealing with other people's money, I always feel like you can just say, no, the project is stopped now, and so on. But when it's your own money, then you think, okay, we'll try this, but we'll let the other thing run a bit longer to be able to switch back. But everyone might be different in that regard. Maybe it's not even such a good strategy. It always depends on the situation. Of course, there are situations where you have to say, okay, this thing is done, we end it and put 0.0 resources into it. But we weren't at that point when we started with the personality.
Makes sense, and I believe it also reflects the entrepreneurial reality for me, for us at MetaFox, definitely. But I also think for many coaches and our listeners, in that we have many interests, a desire for many projects, and we always do them in parallel.
Yes.
How do you handle that? What is your philosophy? Focus versus experimenting?
Oh, that's difficult. I often sit together with the team leads at our place or with my managing partner, Martin, and that's a difficult topic. So we simply try to find a balance. We have to, yes, explore and test something, see if there is any resonance. Is there interest? But we've also had product development where in an initial survey, everyone said, super exciting, this is a great topic. But then when the product was finished and it was really about spending money on it, they preferred to use the free version available online. That is very hard to predict. I am more of a person who tries out many things and doesn't make those hard, strictly scheduled decisions where you immediately make a project plan and then follow through with it. But we have also already said, okay, we can't start too many things because we are also a small company. And sometimes you have some grand ideas and then at some point realize, okay, these are big topics. If you want to bring a reasonable product to the market, then so many resources would have to flow into it. I think that's the crucial thing, that you can already tease things and try them out, but you have to be clear that you start with a minimal viable product, so to speak.
Yes, it resonates a lot what you're saying, the difficulty of knowing how much to invest where and how to measure if it's worth continuing to invest. Do you have an example from your past? For example, maybe the LINC Profiler itself? It sounded like it was so successful that it kept drawing more resources and then a positive story developed.
Yes, exactly. So the LINC Personality Profile is definitely a story where that was not a question at all. No major business decisions had to be made. It was just completely clear. It expanded on its own. Then there were other things in our company that more or less presented themselves without needing any great visionary decisions. More and more companies started asking, hey, great tool, can you also handle the conversations, like the feedback sessions, the coaching with it? Because companies often don't want to do that internally. It's clear that, one might want to have external people more often when it comes to such sensitive topics. Then we built areas in the company that offer services around personality analysis. We call it HR solutions. And that was obvious. It's somehow something where you don't have to be very visionary. And then, of course, we also wanted to bring products to the market that seemed incredibly meaningful to us. And we called it the coaching board. That was also during the Corona period where we said, okay, digital coaching, that's actually the future topic because everything is becoming digital. And there is no platform that really allows for good digital coaching, one that is specialized with a whiteboard and embedded coaching methods and everything that makes up coaching. And then we asked the coaches and they said, great, you absolutely have to do it, definitely. So we did it. And well, then Corona was over. And now it turns out that actually no one wants to coach digitally. So every coach tries to avoid it if possible and coach on site. Well, that's how it goes sometimes. Those are the kinds of things, and if you only do it 2 or 3 times a year, then you just take a Miro board and do it over Zoom. I can understand that. Those are the kinds of things, and then you ask yourself, okay, would you have foreseen all of this, done more market observation? Maybe, yes. So honestly, I think it's very difficult to really find out if people are just saying they are willing to spend money on it or if they actually spend money on it. That's a big step for people, I believe.
So you actually mentioned 3 examples now. The LINC Profiler itself, so the psychometric tool, which also has many subproducts, if I understand correctly. Then the service, essentially a consulting business, where you say, okay, you actually want the all-around service. We provide you with coaches, and then from your work with coaches, an online tool emerged that makes coaching in the online space easier. At the same time, my impression from the outside, from how I got to know you at a trade fair, is that you actually seem like a one-product company. So there's the profiler, right? So how does it look today also if you had to sort the revenue into rough percentage buckets?
That is definitely the core product. But now, as you already mentioned, differentiated into various variants as well. That means if you offer personality analyses, then it is, of course, obvious to also say we offer analyses for different topics. So, for example, leadership, in-depth profiles on the topic of leadership or on the topic of stress or specific consulting forms. Because, for example, one might say there is startup consulting. So we naturally offer an analysis for the topic of entrepreneurial personality. Or there are many career advisors, coaches. So we have the career profiler, which specializes in determining which personality fits which job profile based on the big five, for example. We have a lot of such differentiations. That means it's always the question of whether you take it as a separate product or then say, okay, it's all actually still this one LINC Personality Profiler product. Then it would be the product plus service. The coaching board is its own product. It is definitely something quite different. That is definitely correct. And it also makes up the main part of the revenue. There are growing areas like HR solutions, which are developing very well, but the core product is definitely the LINC Personality Profiler. Yes.
And the LINC Personality Profiler is then a product that I, as a consultant or coach, can use. I do the training with you, pay about 800 euros, an easy 2-day program, and then I can offer it. If you now say HR solutions is something where you also work with freelancers, with coaches you have trained, or do you really have employed coaches there as well?
Exactly. So you outlined that correctly. We do B2B business. We do not target end consumers. That means we provide a tool that independent coaches can use to find a different approach to people in their coaching, because it is naturally obvious to say, hey, we have a very nicely visualized, very appreciative depiction of your personality, and we can use that to discuss your topics in coaching or to delve deeper into them. That's obvious. I think it's clear that this is exciting for coaches. The same also applies to other target groups. So when I do career counseling, or when I do something like outplacement counseling, when I do personnel consulting, these are other areas where it is used. But these are freelancers who use it to have a tool, an instrument that simply allows them to become a bit better at what they do. And then there is the other main target group, which consists of HR managers who say, okay, we want to further develop our employees. We want to support our leaders to lead successfully. We want to engage in team development. And as a modern company, you naturally use appropriate tools for that. And then there are always various offerings. There are type-based instruments, which are viewed critically from a psychological perspective because they simply generate stereotypical thinking and somehow establish it in the company. And that is actually the exact opposite of what you want to do when engaging in HR development.
What is a specific problem that I have when I use the tool, or that my client has, if I now say, okay, now I'm pulling out the LINC Personality Profiler? You've already touched on a few, of course, but I'd like to maybe go a bit deeper, because I also notice myself here in the podcast, I often do demo coachings, and we always call it demo coaching. And often, depending on which tool or method we want to showcase, I bring a concern with me, or I have filled out some profiler beforehand. So we've already done this with DISC, for example, or now with Lars and the LINC Profiler. And then I also realize, okay, we're not necessarily having a coaching conversation. I'm just learning new things about my personality. That's quite nice, but it doesn't really solve a problem for me at all. So what does that look like in practice? What problems do you address with tools like the LINC?
Yes. So what you did with Lars was an evaluation discussion, not coaching. That means in the evaluation discussion, as you correctly say, it's primarily about you being able to ask your questions and the results being explained. And the idea is not that you get coached. For a coaching session, it's like this. Let's look at a normal coaching session. What happens there? I develop a question, and then I first try to see what influencing factors there are on this question. So very individually for me. And then afterwards, what solution options come to mind to somehow solve this question? My coach is only there to somehow accompany me on this path and also to guide me a bit so that I am well guided through this conversation process, from working out the question through gathering information to finding a solution. An instrument like the LINC Personality Profiler, such a differentiated personality analysis, I can use to specifically apply the results to the question. This means the fundamental question is always, what influence does my personality have on this topic? And in coaching, only topics are actually addressed where the answer is a huge influence. Because in coaching, you typically don't do your tax return, where hard facts knowledge is needed and personality plays no role. That means all topics that come up in coaching are extremely strongly influenced by your personality. For example, let's take a concrete example. You are a leader. You have to master this extremely challenging process of leading someone, and you sit with the coach and want support by thinking about how you can lead even more successfully. It's just that your personality has the greatest influence of all factors on how you lead. So it makes a lot of sense to take a detailed personality analysis to see what my leadership style is. Which aspects of leadership are easy for me and which are difficult? This depends on your personality. Whom can I lead more easily and with whom is it more challenging? That depends on your and his personality. The question is more, why coach without the topic of personality? Such a topic, it doesn't really make sense to me. If you have a differentiated personality model with very different profiles, where you have a model behind it that can truly capture personality, like the Big Five model, where you can also address the question of motives. So, do I even want to lead or not? Where you can address competencies, what is easy for me, what is difficult for me, then you get further.
That means it's about explaining challenges I have, for example, as a leader, having a language for it, and through explaining these challenges, perhaps also finding flexibility in my behavior. So finding out, okay, I have a preference to behave in this context, but I see there is a spectrum and I can perhaps consciously move to the other side of the spectrum or find peace with being on this side of the spectrum and somehow bring more calm into it. Does that capture it? Or how would you further specify it?
Yes, definitely. That comes close to it. It's like this. You first understand why you behave the way you do. You understand that your behavior fundamentally stems from your personality. This means our behaviors are not solely oriented by the situation, but people have behavior patterns. People have thought patterns. And if I understand why I behave this way, like where does it actually come from, then I can deal with it. Only then can I consider, do I want to continue behaving this way? Can I simply drop it? Because that's also something often said in coaching. Yes, then just do it differently. But if I understand that, of course, my personality always comes along, you always bring yourself into every situation, then I can consider how I want to deal with it. What does that mean? And how can I perhaps, instead of just always changing something, also inform people more about why I behave this way? I use personality as an extremely important influencing factor. I make it visible in the first place. And by the way, you can do that without such an instrument. That means there are plenty of coaches who simply ask questions in that direction and say, hey, tell me, who are you really? And how do you feel? Of course, that's possible. I don't want to deny that at all. I would always advocate for using the topic of personality as an important influencing factor in all sorts of topics, also in coaching, but it doesn't have to happen with such a tool. You can also do it without. With such an instrument, if it's good, then it just goes faster. I have more information. I have presented it very clearly, very structured, and systematically. I could also do that in coaching if I take many hours and then create a wonderful picture. Then I can definitely do that.
All right. If we take a step back and look at the company LINC and your organization again, how can I imagine that? What sets you apart from other companies? Does everyone do the LINC Profiler during onboarding? What role do your products, etc., play? Take us into your company and your culture.
So, it is of course the case that we focus a lot on the topic of personality, even in our company. So in recruiting, we naturally use our tools. We also use them for the development of our employees. And above all, we try to live what we talk about in our corporate culture. For example, leadership, or that people are taken seriously in their personality, that different personalities can also develop. That is, of course, something where different styles are accepted to some extent. And that is somehow a core part of our DNA for us, that we say, hey, we don't just want to somehow delight others with the topic of personality, but also ensure internally that everyone feels I can be myself here, I can unfold and also develop my personality here. And for that, we naturally try to use our tools, but also to implement it in, for example, the leadership culture and communication culture.
Now, I believe you are currently in the process of internationalizing your marketing, bringing the LINC Profiler to the USA. What are you noticing on this journey?
Cultures are different, but in this case, it is something positive because the Americans receive it very well and are very positive about it. And we also feel in these certifications that there is a lot of that classic enthusiasm. We also go to other countries and look for partners there. And at the moment, primarily English-speaking countries. And we are currently having very positive experiences, especially regarding communication and openness to new things. So at the moment, it's a very nice process.
Mm-hmm. And what role does that play for you today? How many trainings, how many LINC coaches are there who are not in the German-speaking region?
Yes, not yet playing a very big role. So that is something we are currently building, developing, and which at the moment does not yet have a very large scale. The goal is to have 10 languages by the end of the year, the 10 most important languages, and to offer the instrument in these languages, but we are still in the process of internationalization.
Great. Then I might finish with a short lightning round. I'll ask you a series of short questions and you can respond with short answers.
Okay.
The most overused buzzword in the coaching market these days.
Artificial intelligence.
A book every coach should have read.
Our Big 5 manual.
Where do clients perceive things incorrectly when it comes to coaching?
They think that coaching is consulting and somehow want tips, assistance, solutions from the coach.
The most exciting innovation in the coaching and coaching tools market?
AI? Definitely, yeah.
If you had to choose a KPI, a measurement for coaching success, what would it be?
To what percentage the developed solution is really implemented in practice?
Your favorite method to recharge after a full work week?
Sauna.
Your advice, your recommendation for anyone who wants to start a coaching business?
If you want to know honestly, I would always offer training. It's the easier way to make money with coaching. Always training people. That's my experience.
A tool or an app that you can't imagine your daily life without?
Well, ChatGPT, right? That's obvious at the moment.
And last but not least, the best investment you've made in yourself in recent years?
The sauna.
This is it for our entrepreneurial masterclass with Dr. Ronald Franke. You heard it, now off to the sauna. Ronald's best investment into himself. If you're thinking, sauna, not right now, but I'm curious about this personality profiler that Ronald has built, then head over to LINC.de, or if you're in the US or Canada, linknorthamerica.com. You'll find all the info about the profiler tool and also their coach certification program there. And if you're like, I want to see a bit more about that first, then I can also recommend our last episode where we really unpacked the profiler tool together with Ronald's colleague Lars and looked at my own results for the personality profiler. We'll be back here in 2 weeks, then surely again with an English original and also with an original coach story, looking both into the business and the actual coaching practice and conversation. Thanks for joining the Making of a Coach today. I'm Tobi from MetaFox. All the best and bye-bye.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.